Hey, good afternoon, everyone. It's me, Nisi. Wanted to come to you today to read chapter 7 of the Lost Teachings of Atlantis. I discussed this yesterday briefly, and I thought this would be noted importance for everyone that's in the group. If you haven't picked up the copy of the book, I highly suggest that you do so. And if you want to follow along with Alex and Alex linked a video a couple of days ago of the YouTube version of the book. I have not actually had a chance to listen to it to see if it covers the entire book or if it goes up to so many chapters. But definitely this book is something that I would urge each one of you to pick up. I'm just going to go into reading chapter 7, and it's called The History of the Children of the Law of One from the Beginning to 2001 is where it picks up at. And again, as you noted, John Peniel is the person that is writing the book about his life in the monastery and his life lessons and the things that's happened to him over his time while he was here with us on the earth. And I just implore each one of you to take the time out to get the book and to read it, because it will help you with your ascension to be in touch with the creator of all, or the one, as we like to call him. So it says in the first part of chapter 7, why the history? It says, I was never fond of history in school. Thinking back on it, though, it was partly because it was both written and presented in a boring way. But that wasn't all. Specific dates of events were focused on far more than the story of the events. Furthermore, the portrayal of events often had either important omissions or additions that were outright lies or colored to fit into someone's program of what they wanted us to learn and believe. There's an old saying about he who wins the war writes the history, and that's not the half of it. My religious training as a child was fraught with similar problems, as I could not get what I considered to be straight or valid or logical answers to many of my questions. But I'd finally found a source of unadulterated history, and one far more interesting and far-reaching than any other. And it included both the secular history of the world and the religious history of multiple religions. But regarding some of the aspects of history, I still had a bit of a block left over from my school days. There was absolutely a valid point to learning real history of any kind, at least in the sense of one who doesn't learn from the past is condemned to repeat it. And I had always longed for the history I was finally going to get a chance to learn. But nonetheless, at the time, I still had the rebellious school kid nagging me in the back of my mind, somewhere because of my bad programming, saying, what's the point? After all, be here now, and had been my motto for a while. So even though it seemed ridiculous, I asked my instructor, Zane, what I never had the nerve to say to my high school teachers. Only this time it was regarding the history of the children from the time of creation. What's the point in learning this? What's the point? Here was his reply. To know the way of the one, how the universe is, how it works, the immutable laws behind its existence and functioning, has always been fundamental to all of the children of the law of one, knowledge and teachings. Even now, the knowledge can be helpful to those who seek to return to the one, to the universal consciousness, to a way of living in harmony with the flow of the universe. To these ends, one should understand how the world as we know it became this way. To know the way it all began. Why? Backtracking, like hikers who have lost their way. If they can determine how they got where they are and where they came from, they can find their way back. If they had a map, so much the better. Thus, the better we understand how we lost our spiritual existence, separated from the oneness, or as I call the creator of all, and became trapped in this earth, the better our knowledge can help us to get free from our traps and return to our spiritual source. And that, my friends, is what we are all trying to do today in 2020. So, next section it states, for your journey now, we offer you a road map of sorts. This map is a story and a history. Written below is the children of the law of one's account of creation in the early days of life on earth. The same story has been passed on by spiritual ancestors throughout the time since our beginnings on earth. the adepts who transferred it to their students, who became adepts, who transferred it to their students, who became adepts, and et cetera, have created a chain through history, a lineage of knowledge, connecting us directly to our universal source. I give this to you here as it was given to me, as it was given to my personal teacher before me, and to his before him. I now pass it on to you, an open link in the potential chain. And it says, prehistory. I have edited the following story somewhat, adapting some modern English terminology and structure just for the ease of understanding. But the teachings is fully intact and very close to the original translations. Even so, you will not be able to truly or completely realize the meaning of our history and the separation from the oneness until you are free from your earthly bonds and the limitations of your brain and consciousness. But what can you do other than work with what you've got? Enjoy. Okay, so what I'm about to read to you is going to be kind of confusing. I've had to read it a couple times myself, so you might have to replay this video. I'm going to try to keep this short. And I'm just going to read straight from the book and then maybe make another video at a different time. I'm just going to read you the first translation and then also the translation that comes from our Grandmaster Yeshua Thoth Hermes. Okay, so Jesus. But let's just read. Okay. Know your true self and you will know the true story. Know your whole self and you will know the wholeness of the truth. All is one, there is no other. Thus it always was and thus it always shall remain. Only one. We once experienced only oneness, one being with no division or separate parts. There was no time, no space, nothing other than us. When you are only one, there is only you, nothing else to interact with. In order to experience interaction, to experience being with someone else, to experience play, the one divided within itself. Duplicating the one, thus creating many ones, many beings within the one. Part of this was modern science calls the Big Bang Theory. That's in parentheses. Still, one being, now in many parts, were we, capable of pretending to be other than one, while still being one in harmonious consciousness. Okay, you guys with me so far? By vibration was it done. Division, multiplication, and expansion of the one. Set into motion were vibrations throughout the universe. On it went, dividing, multiplying, creating new aspects of vibration through the overtones of harmony and ripples of the interacting vibratory reflections. Created thus many new things and also initiate the time and space. That's the next thing. Each of us were the entity of the one, the entirety of the one, the dark, the light, the stars, the planets, all of us macrocosms of the one. In clusters, groups, we were in all directions, we being the entire universe. We then roamed ourselves as consciousnesses, as beings that cannot be described or understood by the present earth consciousness. We're going to try though, right? Yet, describe I will try as best as I can. Our existence was as close as you can comprehend in your present consciousness as beings of spirit, energy, light, star, solar systems, the groups that can be foundations of vibratory frequency in creating the physical plane of matter. The appearances there and that was which forms the bodies of that plane, unattached, ever flowing within the flows of the universal one, were we, enjoying all the wonders of our creation. Our consciousness both semi-separate from yet still one with the entire creation of the universe, allowed us experiencing of new and different things. But within the new creation were the material planes. These were the realms in which existed the most dense or slowest spectrum of vibrations. there were many material planes throughout the universe, the earth being just one plane. The story I'm about to tell is the only of those who manifested in the realm of this earth. But others of us manifested in material planes of other solar systems. Some are now of higher consciousness. Kindred beings are they from other worlds. But some from other worlds are of the selfish and evil. When we came upon the earth, or when we came upon the world of the earth, we had no comparison, no experience of the like, no expectation of what would be. The first group of us to discover the material plane were in awe of the new sensations it offered. Thus, first group, or the first wave of souls to materialize, was the first to enter the vibrational spectrum of matter in the time space of the earth. They experienced such pleasure from playing in it that they projected themselves deeply into matter in thought forms. Note, in parentheses, using thought to create a body, okay, that were the most stimulating, the most sensual, those of the animal realm creations. In creating these bodies, assorted aspects of different animals were often combined to achieve what they thought would be very desirable blends. A bird head, a human body, horse body, human head, goat head, human body, fish tail, human torso, and many, many, many other variations. Note, in parentheses, these would much later become known as the Greek and the Roman mythology by names: centaurs, mermaids, minotaurs, etc. Unfortunately, these ones are close kindred, had no way of knowing that as soon as they hardened their thought forms into matter, becoming these creatures, that they would lose all awareness, all consciousness of the most things beyond their new bodies and their immediate environment. They became trapped in these forms. The 7 ports, chakras, the 7 ports or chakras were closed, cutting off the contact of the full vibrational spectrum, and thus all their perceptions and interactions were thus based upon only limited vibrations. They could not detect through only their 5 vibrational senses: sight, see, touch, smell, etc. Their 5 senses. They were limited to their 5 senses, clamped down to their 5 senses, and their chakras were closed. These 5 senses could only monitor very limited frequency bands of the full universal vibrational spectrum. And even in that, they focused on only those vibrations relevant to the material plane of existence, living these humanimals without any senses of the spiritual planes of existence. They were cut off from the consciousness of the one, and thus the very universe itself. The humanimals experienced animal consciousness, but the beings inhabited these forms were not animals and originally of angelic consciousness. The combination of the consciousness that was meant to be of a higher form blended with the animal consciousness was a very inharmonious and disruptive mix, and I could see that. They lost the purity of animal consciousness and the purity of spiritual consciousness. So this was a new kind of consciousness that was foreign to the animal realm. This new consciousness was separate consciousness and was of a fixed focus nature and reverse polarity in comparison to the consciousness of the one. Intelligence was only severely curtailed in the humanimals, being similar to the intelligence of type of animals that were not modeled upon, but again, this was adversely affected by the negative effects of separate consciousness. Thus, were the humanimals stuck in a limited plane, in limited forms, with limited intelligence in a new limited consciousness. They didn't fit in anywhere. They didn't belong in the spiritual realms any longer, nor did they belong in the earth's nature. Thus, their introduction into the earth plane was also disruptive and polluting to the flow of nature here on earth. Thus, Those of us who did not project ourselves into matter were quite aware of the predicament and fates that had befallen our kin. From the vantage point of our natural etheric state of existence, we were still of one mind and one being. Seeing part of us in such matter-bound prisons as humanimals had become trapped in was very painful. After all, the creatures were us, and they were our step-brothers, step-sisters, brothers. They were our sisters and brothers, and their misfortune was our misfortune. In the terminology of, they might also be the first fallen angels, but they fell not of ill intent. There was no sin when they first fell. Understand? Let me read it again. In the terminology of some, they might also be called the first fallen angels, but they fell not of ill intent, but by virtue of ignorance of the purest kind. We decided to save them no matter the cost. We knew we could only do this if we could function on the same vibratory plane as they. So we too projected ourselves into thought forms that could function within the realms of the Earth Mother. Led by the great being who became known as the Atlantean Amelius, then later known as Thoth or Thoth, and eventually well known as Jesus, must later, the second wave of our eternity entering into the planes of the Earth Mother begin. I'm going to read that sentence one more time so you guys can catch that. Led by the great being who became known as the Atlantean Amelius, then known later as Thoth, and eventually well known as Jesus much later, the second wave of our entering into the planes of the Earth Mother began. Careful to stay as humans, careful to stay as beings free from the lower vibratory planes or hardening into matter. We projected ourselves into the material plane with thought-formed bodies that were semi-etheric matter, but not matter. Thus were we still able to function on all vibrational frequencies of the universal spectrum, free to enter or leave the limited spectrum of the material plane at will. But mostly, we were very intent upon maintaining our consciousness of oneness so that we would not fall to the same fate as the humanimals. The manifestation was achieved more and less successfully. And as we became subject to the vibration conditions which affected this realm, we saw the numerological representations of the physical plane, 2 and 5, appear in many aspects of our manifestations. For example, the beginnings of 5 races occurred, and later the 2 sexes, each being having 5 appendages, 2 legs, 2 arms, 1 head, with 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 legs, 2 of many organs, etc., and 5 fingers, toes on the same arms and legs. Despite our precautions and great efforts, some of us still fared not as well as others, losing more consciousness and hardening more than others. Those who manifested in Atlantis with Amelius fared the best, but for many, this was to be short-lived. Until this time, we were composite beings, microcosms of the one. Our bodies were not as they are now. Our male and female elements had yet not separated. As composite beings, we each had one body that contained both sexes, rather than the male and female bodies we have now. The sexes then being just the inner and outer elements and outflowing and inflowing parts of our whole being. These were soulmate groups as they are called now. Each composite being had different numbers of parts, a different number of soulmates, and that's in parentheses. Each part of a being itself, but fully as one with the whole being. We were like beings in which planets orbit a star, or the atoms of matter in which elements of different polarity, male and female, are attracted to each other, each finding a place where they harmoniously function together within the whole as one entity, as one being. As such composite beings, we existed in a state of unselfish love. Constant flow out, flowing, giving fully of our life energies to each element of ourselves, within ourselves, and receiving within ourselves and without in our relationship with the one, which each composite being also orbited, creating the even greater ultimate composite being of the one. So they were still part of the infinite beater, the infinite creator. They still had that. They still had that consciousness. Now, for the first time, some of us had begun to separate within ourselves, manifesting individual bodies representing the polarity elements. Bodies of opposite polarities then came into existence, known as male and female sex. The work of freeing the humanimals began. It was arduous and complex, but it proceeded well at first. Unfortunately, the contamination of separateness slowly began to creep in. We started slowly, tasting many of the things that had instantly trapped the humanimals. Divisions began to occur between the Atlanteans over opinions and desires. The next symptom of our disintegration was upon us, and this disease would eventually bring down Atlantis, even in the higher states of manifestation, which we thought would keep us safe from the loss of consciousness that plagued the humanimals. Some of us succumbed to the lure of material sensation. Like the drug addict would behave with an unlimited supply of drugs, we began to delve more into the advantages of this plane until we were lost in it, drowning in it. In the frenzy of our addiction to physical sensations, we disregarded all these precautions and awareness. Soon, our thoughts and actions had collected matter from the material world that surrounded us and hardened us, our thought forms making us matter-bound also. Our consciousness simultaneously slipped, and our gradual loss of consciousness of the oneness gave way to that new consciousness of predominant separation or separateness. The consciousness of predominant separateness was foreign to us, a totally new experience. And along with the new consciousness came new emotions, some pleasurable and some painful. Strange new things like greed, envy, lust, excitement, fear, desire. Some of us vigorously strived to maintain a semblance of our consciousness of the oneness along with the new consciousness, and we were able to experience the emotions without being ruled by them. Such were the children of the law of one. But others lost or chose to deliberately suppress even a glimmer of awareness of the one. These beings became lost and enmeshed in separateness. Outside of the consciousness of the oneness, they became subject to being tossed to and fro by the tides of the emotional onset and ultimately became devoted to the personal power and pleasure in the physical plane. These beings became known as the sons of Belial. Even they were female. So don't get the name twisted. They're both male and female. Sons of Belial. Take heed of the ancient warnings and prophecies about the Belialians. Lizard-like are they, not in apparent physical description, but in spirit form, in the heart, in the soul. Beware, even now, of your lizard kin, for they rule this world with greed and without compassion, while maintaining appearance of good and righteous. As men and women do, these sons of Belial walk the earth among you. Model citizens, successful leaders who are the envy of the uninitiated. While some appear disgusting and strange to the eye, look not to see the ugliness of the Belialians with your eye, for some are handsome and becoming to the eye. See you will not their true lizard-like appearance with their earthly eyes. See their true nature. You will only with the inner eye, the third eye. The inner eye, or in glimpses from the corner of the eye. When the division came within the people of Atlantis, many things were awry and turmoil began. To function harmoniously, beings need to have omnipresence. Their vision must include the whole picture. But when the attention is fixed and focused in the reverse polarity of separation, all that is seen are parts of the whole picture. These parts that are not filtered out of the illusions of separate consciousness. It is a limited view at best and often is lens distorted by emotions. Without awareness of the whole picture and the guidance of the coordinating force, actions become uncoordinated with others. To understand this better, imagine how well your present day body would function if each limb did not have awareness of what the other was trying to do, or if each limb wanted to do different things from each other, no longer working as one. Now imagine further. Imagine this lack of coordination keeping your eyes, ears, fingers, tongue, and mouth from working together as a team. Now, consider the chaos and eventually destruction that would occur if every single cell in your body operated with no unified guiding force that keeps this coordination with the whole. In fact, that's what cancer is. You see the lost consciousness of the one. Okay, you see this because the problem with our very lives, once some of us lost consciousness of the one. Such uncoordinated, independent activity becomes a logical evolution when such a separation occurs and one is left with only an awareness of separateness. Thus, it came to be that the new Atlantean social political groups involved were with one very essential difference. The children had consciousness of both separateness and oneness, and the Belialians rejected the consciousness of oneness entirely and maintained only a consciousness of separateness. The differences of the opinion between the two groups were great and many, including environmental issues, but nothing was more of an issue than the morality of how the humanimals were to be dealt with. Those of the law of one, remembering still that we originally came to this plane just to help release the humanimals from the matter bondage, continuing trying to free our trapped siblings. The kindred also created ways known to the initiated to aid in the maintenance of the consciousness of ones, so we would never lose sight of our goals. But the Belialians wanted to use humanimals for their own comforts and pleasures. Since those of us from the second wave were greater consciousness than humanimals and could still function on higher planes to some extent, we had powers of the mind, both spiritual and psychological, that made it easy for us to control the humanimals. The children refused to use abilities to control the humanimals, while the children refused to use their abilities to control the humanimals, while the Belialians relished the power and wanted to use them as slaves. The other great division in opinion between the children and the Belialians was over the environment, as it is called now. The Belialians used methods of generating power like the electrical power that were dangerous and destructive to the earth. Thus did the great conflict between the children of the Belialians of okay, let me read this again. Thus did the great conflict between the children and the Belialians of Atlantis begin. A conflict between light and dark, between selfishness and unselfish love, and the conflict that was contained throughout history and continues to this day on this planet. The Belialians' lust for power and lack of care of awareness of the balances of nature led to the destruction of Atlantis. This was due in great part of the abuse of their power-generated plants. When the final destruction occurred, Grandmaster Thoth then led us to the land of Kim to complete the great work of evolving the humanimals. As gods were we to the people of Kim, and yea, did they think the humanimals to be gods. And so it was done. The humanimals were brought to the human levels to choose their path from there. Yet there are the residual effects. Have you not seen the animals that look much like pigs or goats, and thus are the animal? Have you not seen humans that look much like pigs or goats, and are this or that animal? Still, these were they. But even though the humanimals were no more, the Belialians had not lost their taste for slavery. Thus, the great conflict with the Belialians was far from over and still continues with the children of law of one as lamps, illuminating the path of unselfish love, helping the lost find their way home to their spiritual heritage of the one, and to find freedom while the disguised. Let me reread that. Thus, the great conflict with the Belialians was far from over and still continues on with the children of the law of one as lamps illuminating the path of unselfish love, helping the lost find their way as to their spiritual heritage of the one, and to find freedom while the disguised sons of Belial and their pawns do everything possible to maintain their decadence and power and maintain slavery on this planet. whether it is directed or by means of livelihood, social, economic, political, and religious control. And they seek to destroy all those who shine light into the world of darkness. All those who do not actively work for the light are to varying degrees pawns of the Belialians' darkness. I'm going to say this and I'm going to cut this video short. Sorry for making errors in the reading. Try not to be dramatic or too intense, but when I read this, I had to come to you and read it to you all as well. I know that you're more than capable of getting the book. I know that you're more than capable of looking it up on YouTube and listening to it. I wanted to share this within our group on Facebook, and I wanted you guys to understand that there is a war, as we all know. There's a war going on. There's a way for us to connect to the Creator. And I know I'm going to get flack when I say this, but I'm going to say it quickly. It is not going into a building and paying tithes and worshiping. It is not going in every single Sunday and sitting down and singing songs and praying. Yes, church is great for community and uplifting and building people. But the ultimate goal is to seek oneness with the Creator. Seek oneness with the Creator is within yourself, aligning your chakras, activating your energy body. This will help you. It teaches you how to breathe. It teaches you how to meditate. It keeps you on a schedule. It tells you what foods you're supposed to eat. There's a diet you are supposed to follow. If you are cut off with the Creator, which I am cut off from the Creator because I have not achieved that oneness or that consciousness, that heightened state of consciousness. If you are not that and you're not enlightened, then yes, you are cut off and you're in this physical plane and we're lost souls. We're all lost souls and we're trying to get home. That's all I have to say. I love you guys and I hope you guys have a great afternoon. Replay this video as often as you need to and pick up the book, because I say we all need to find the Creator. We all need to get back home. We're on limited time. We are running out of time. For you to get this far along in your journey in life to understand what's going on now, how many times or how many lives have you lived and reincarnated where you didn't get this far to where you have the knowledge you have today? So I say it is a reason why you're watching this video, and it is a reason why you understand what I have read to you. I love you guys. Please believe me when I say I want you all to rest in peace, love, and power. And I want all of us to be one with the Creator again. Have a good day.